Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Business Connected Lunch and Learn on goal setting with Steven Bartlett, all about how to turn your business ideas into action. My name is Roisin. I'm one of the program managers at Enterprise Nation, and it's an absolute pleasure to introduce today's speaker. He's an entrepreneur, investor, and the co-founder of the social chain, Steven Bartlett.
Hello, nice to be here with you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, I'm so glad that you'll be being able to make today's session as well. And I wanted to give a very warm welcome as well to everyone who's joining today's event. We hope that you leave today's session with a clearer understanding of how you can take your business to the next level. So Steven is here with us today to take us through goal setting and the key aspects that you can apply to your business. So as part of this session, we'll be deep diving into why goal setting is imperative to the success of your business, how to set goals that align with your business strategy, and finally, we'll be going through those top tips on how you can put your business ideas into action. So there's quite a lot of people who are joining today's session, and we have over 3,000 people signed up to this session. If you have any questions for Steven, please pop them in the chat box, but please don't be too disappointed if your question doesn't get answered. There's going to be lots of key takeaways and nuggets of information that you can take away from today's session and apply to your business. And there's also plenty of resources as well that we can point you to. So this session is part of the Business Connected program. So Enterprise Nation have partnered with Vodafone Business to equip 150,000 small and medium-sized businesses with digital skills they need to take their operations to the next level. So for those of you who are listening live, you can visit Business Connected on the Enterprise Nation platform. So we have our e-learning modules, our fortnightly lunch and learns, as well as our other workshop topics as well. So we'll be popping a few links in the chat box for you then. And Steven is here today as he is one of the Vodafone Business ambassadors as well. So it's great that he's been able to join us. So Steven, should we dive straight into today's session?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Sounds great. Firstly, can you tell me a little bit more about your business journey and how your business journey actually started? I know a lot of people on today's session will know you from starting as one of the co-founders of the social chain, but was there more kind of going on there? Did it start before that? And kind of, yeah, how has that journey gone?
Yeah, so I first started businesses when I was about 14, 15, 16. I hadn't registered them as companies, but I was selling tickets to events that I was putting on, and I was trying to sell Japanese clothes online and various different things. I went to university at 18 years old after doing a lot of sort of entrepreneurial things in sixth form as well. I ultimately got expelled, kicked out of sixth form because I was so preoccupied with the business side of things. Funnily enough, I just did that TV show, Would I Lie to You? And one of the things that you know, they have someone walk out through the little lift and you've all got to lie about who they are. And it was actually my head teacher. So I read out this statement, this is my head teacher who unexpelled me because I made the school so much money. And that's actually true. I got expelled the first time. Then the head teacher unexpelled me with the reasoning that I was his Harry Potter. He wanted to keep me under the stairs because I made the school so much money. So I got unexpelled, but then in the last month or so of school, then they expelled me again when I really could do nothing else. My attendance in school was about 30%. Off I go to university with pretty bad grades, and I last for one lecture. I drop out after that lecture, and then I go off on the journey of starting my own business, which at the time was called Wall Park. I ran that business for about 2-3 years, quit out of the blue, having seen an opportunity in the social media space, which has led rise to Social Chain, which was really a pivot of my first business. The other co-founder of Social Chain was actually one of my first employees at Wall Park. I ran Social Chain for about 7 years. When I left, the company was doing about 500 million in revenue. Resigned when I was 27 years old. Took a year out in the middle of COVID to kind of figure out my life again. Started the podcast. At that point, started a company called Third Web, which we've just closed about 25 million in funding. The company is now valued at about $160 million. Started Flight Story, which is sort of an innovative investor relations company. I launched my fund, which is a 100 million fund to invest in young startups. and lots of other things that I could go into. Joined Huel as well. I could probably list a lot of companies that I'm involved in, and then obviously became a dragon on Dragon's Den. That's one of the things that I'm known for as well. So to summarize that, I probably invest in about 30 companies. I'm probably on the board of about 5 or 6, and right now I'm the founder of about 3 or 4 different companies that are in different industries. I'm also the creative director of the biggest psychedelics business in the world that was valued at 3 billion when we took it public last year. So lots of different things going on all over the place, but hopefully that's given me enough relevant experience to answer whatever questions you have today.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it definitely does. And I know when we were talking before, we were just speaking before we went live on this webinar about everything that you were doing. And I was going to say, you probably get that question a lot about how's your business journey been, what's it like? But I realised very quickly, actually, there's loads of things kind of going on all the time, and you're probably just kind of managing and balancing that also as you go along as well. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, has goal setting led in any way to the successes of your business? Because I know you said you've invested in over 30 businesses today, as well as having a number of your own as well. So can you explain a bit about how goal setting has led to the successes of your businesses, if it has done, and if not, has anything else led to the success of them?
I think, yeah, I mean, goal setting definitely has led to the success of pretty much everything I do. I think of the Diary of a CEO podcast as a business itself, because it operates in the same way. There's a lot of people that work on it, so that's the example that I'll try and use the most of, because it's the easiest kind of thing to understand out of some of these other complex organizations. But goal setting is sort of paramount to everything that I do in business. And I kind of see goals in, I guess, 3 tiers. So I have my macro goals. So a macro goal as it relates to my podcast would be, we want to create a podcast that helps people to feel and think better and reaches as many people as possible in all corners of the world in as many ways as we can. So just say that was our macro goal. So underneath that macro goal, we have a bunch of medium goals that we have to accomplish in order to achieve that, and they all feed into that macro goal. So you can kind of break down that high level macro goal into sub goals, and one of those goals might be, we want to increase the distribution of the podcast. And so underneath that medium goal, so macro, medium, and I'd say micro goals, we have a bunch of other micro goals that will help that. And one of them you might have seen recently is we've done a deal with 6 different airlines, including Qatar, BA, British Airways, Iberia, and 3 others, so that the podcast will be streamed in all of those long-haul flights all around the world. Any plane that has a screen will stream the podcast. That's a world first deal, and that all stemmed from this macro goal, which was broken into a medium goal, where we spotted distribution as one of the contributing factors to that macro goal. And then it became basically a micro goal, which is basically a to-do list task. And from that sort of medium goal, we had that one thing, which was, can we get it onto airlines? Another thing is, and this, I don't think anybody knows this, but the podcast will be streamed in prisons all up and down the country. Again, that was a distribution goal that we had. So feeding into the medium goal of distribution, which feeds into the macro goal of us creating the world's furthest reaching conversations. Now that we're about to finish it off, but the podcast will be streamed into prisons all over the UK in a new scheme to allow prisoners to access content that is meaningful for their lives. And when it gets to that bottom level, where we're talking about micro goals that feed into the medium and macro, there is a certain philosophy that I think successful teams have to making sure that those goals get accomplished. And for me, I'm a big believer in deadlines. And I've observed this for many years, having run an organization where we had almost 1,000 people. I've observed how the lack of deadlines, and honestly the lack of tight deadlines, can hold your company back in ways you would never know. I've observed how a task that could take 2 weeks can take 6 months. And you think about the cost and the inefficiency of an organization where a 2-week task bumbles around on an email chain waiting for Rob to get back from annual leave. So I'm a big believer in deadlines, and in my teams, I actually allow my teams to set the deadline. So whoever's responsible for the task, they get to set the deadline. And my end of the bargain is I will give you all of the resources and all of the autonomy that you need to achieve that deadline. But your end of the bargain is you've told me when it will be complete, and it's a tight deadline. So, and we've managed to achieve pretty remarkable things with that thesis. So like even the British Airways deal, which was our original airline deal, that operated in the same way. Responsibility went to Emma. She created the deadline, she told me the deadline, and then I'll give her all the resources she needs to hire, spend, whatever to achieve that deadline. The next point on that, like those micro goals is, especially in organizations and teams, is responsibility. So when someone is not responsible for something, or when everyone is responsible for something, no one is responsible for something. And I've observed this in my organization too. I remember one instance specifically where I had this idea for this innovation that I thought would be really valuable. The idea was, I had a thesis about how you could check if people were faking their engagement on social media. And we were working with about 3,000 influencers a month for all of our brands around the world. So being able to tell brands that certain influencers were faking their engagement for us was quite a world first. So I sent this out to my teams in the early days on an email thread with 15 people. It's safe to say 3 months later, we were waiting for Pete to get back from annual leave and someone was thinking about it and everyone was chiming in still. Taking that task and giving it to one person to be responsible for, setting them a tight deadline and making the group a fraction of the size, got that exact same task done in 2 weeks, and it defined our business. When I say it defined our business, we believe that it drove new business for Social Chain for about 2 years. That's something that could have died on an email thread. So responsibility, with responsibility comes autonomy, which means you have to trust people, which means I will give you all the resources, you set the deadline, and I will trust you, right? So I won't micromanage, I will trust you. I talked about resources. The other point, which I think is somewhat understated, is my organization always achieved micro goals and innovation generally way more successfully and faster if the team was way smaller. So I used to create something at Social Chain called Move Fast and Make Things, which was a small group of people, 4 people. Whenever we had an innovation idea or a new project, 4 people go into a group chat. Sometimes WhatsApp, these days it would be Discord or Workplace or Teams or whatever. And those 4 people, one of them was responsible for getting it done, but those 4 people were like the project team to get it done. What we would do is, if we needed more resource from a graphic designer, we would tag them in and usually tag someone out, but sometimes we just tag them in for a small period of time, then take them out. You want to keep groups small because you don't need, for a lot of things, you don't need huge amounts of consensus. Huge amounts of consensus can kill great ideas, but it also slows things down. So 4 people typically, usually a 2-week deadline. Sometimes we'd extend it where we needed to. And then the last point I'd say is clarity of why. So being really, really clear with those 4 people, but the wider organization, why we have this as a goal. And I think, but you know, sometimes, especially CEOs, founders, whatever, entrepreneurs, they can see the vision, but they're not as good as communicating that vision to the people that are implementing the vision. So having buy-in for all goals at every level, from the macro goal to the medium goals to those micro goals, is imperative if you want people to be motivated and go above and beyond using their own initiative to get those things done. And I'm going to give one last thing, actually, because this is more of a point on innovation, but organizations that don't innovate are organizations that reward or punish the outcome of experiments and goals. What does that mean? So one of the things I noticed is people will not, so like in terms of incentives, people will not innovate, they will not strive towards completing goals if they feel like they're going to be punished for the success of the goal being accomplished. So let me give an example as that piece of software that I said could find fake followers. The team that worked on that, if they thought they were going to be punished for it being successful and actually working and clients buying it, they would be approaching that task with a certain timidness and hesitancy and lack of engagement because they are not incentivized correctly. So what we always did at Social Chain is we celebrated and incentivized people when the goal or the experiment was complete, not based on whether it worked or not, because that's out of your team's hands. And everyone in your organization is not going to be incentivized to step out of their role, their remit, the thing that's on their job spec, if they're going to be punished for an experiment that could fail depending on the market demand. That's critically important. The minute you the minute you accomplish the innovation, the minute you accomplish the goal, celebrate then. Don't celebrate when it works or not. And that creates a culture where all of your employees and all of your teams should know that success is completing the experiment. It's not the outcome of the experiment, which causes people to innovate. And after all, that's the only thing that they can control. So yeah, long answer.
No, that's amazing. Thank you. And I think, yeah, that's definitely true what you said in terms of buy-in and getting people to really buy into kind of the goals that you're setting for your organization. I had a follow-up question come in from someone actually. What are your tips for getting senior leaders like your boss, your CEO, to stick to goals and deadlines?
What are my tips for getting senior leaders to stick to goals?
Yeah, so like other senior leaders, or even if, yes, say if that question was on reverse, like getting you, for example, to stick to kind of your goals and deadlines.
That's really interesting. How do people get me to stick to goals and deadlines? That's so interesting. I've never thought about that before, because so I'm going to think of a time when I was, so often it is the case that in my business I'm a bottleneck, and that can often lead to deadlines being missed. So it's interesting because I've never thought about it from that perspective. But what I do to my teams is when they set their deadline, I'll also basically set a Steve becoming a bottleneck policy, which means that I remember having a conversation with a team member recently called Holly when we were in when we took the team to LA, and I said to Holly, really, I remember where I sat when I said it to her. I said, if you need me for something and I'm not replying or responding or whatever, or I'm busy, you have the right to call me over and over and over again. You can call me 20 times in a minute, because you cannot allow someone else in another team to compromise you getting your job done. And often it is the case in organizations where I can often think of, think times at Social Chain where our happiness team, who were responsible for keeping the office in order, were not meeting their goals because the creative team were making the office a mess after completing a client campaign. So in that situation, you have two teams, one of which is their objectives are being compromised by another team who aren't concerned about their goals. So I used to say to our happiness team as well, like, you have to fight for the completion of your goals in the face of other people in teams that might not help you achieve them. And I would have to say that in my organization, I am probably the #1 reason why deadlines don't get met. My own perfectionism, my own obsessiveness about details. I think that's probably the #1 reason goals don't get met. So as in deadlines don't get met.
I was going to say, and yeah, thank you for being so honest about that as well. And yeah, I thought that was a great follow-up question from Simon as well, kind of asking that almost on the kind of the flip side to you as well. So yeah, just thank you for being honest about that. So when it comes to our small business owners and entrepreneurs listening in, what advice do you have to give to them in terms of setting their own goals for their business?
Yeah, so going back to what I said, like, all of my goals are reverse engineered from the macro goal. So you should be pretty clear on what your macro goal is. And the macro goal is kind of the vision of your organization, what you want to achieve. And from that, you can quite literally create a web of medium goals that need to be accomplished in order for the macro goal to be achieved. So say that, going back to the example I gave earlier, my macro goal might be, and this is not my goal because I don't like goals that are based in comparison. So, but just for ease, we want to create the biggest podcast in the world. Right? I'd never set that as a goal because it views the world as a finite game and it's based in comparison. So it's not actually about you or the impact you want to have. Being the best in the world at something is quite literally just being better than whoever's second best. There's no sort of substance to that. This is a side point about trying to avoid goals that are based on comparison, that are actually completable. So all of my macro goals are not completable, that you could never complete them, which is a kind of a paradoxical thing to say, but they would be things like build a platform that, in terms of the podcast, build a platform that allows people to feel and think better in every corner of the world. This is something that you can never complete because there's always going to be more people to reach. There's always going to be better ways to have a conversation, skills that I can learn, guests that we can bring in. just using the podcast as an example. From that, say that was my goal, best podcast in the world. The medium goals would look like things, improve the get the world's best guests. So how do we do that? There's a bunch of to-do list tasks that come off that. And those could involve hiring, our processes, our pitch, everything. Another one would be have the best studio in the medium goal would be have the best studio in the world. From that, we have a bunch of micro to-do list style tasks. Every stage in this, the medium and the micro, you have to have someone that has clear responsibility over it. If multiple people have responsibility, as I said earlier, nobody has responsibility. And in my team, whenever we discuss a goal, whether it's in the medium level of let's have the best studio in the world, or it's at the micro level, I can tell you the exact individual that owns that task. And you cannot operate in business in any other way, in my opinion. And then the macro goal should be owned by all of the team. So the macro is owned by all of us as a team. That's why we're here. That's why we're waking up in the morning. The medium goal is owned by a specific person, and the micro is also owned by a specific person.
That's great. Thank you so much. And also for like business owners who haven't, I suppose, gone about setting goals for their businesses before as well, what advice and top tips do you have for them actually kind of starting to think to develop what those goals could be for their business?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, when I was starting out in business, I didn't set goals, because as an entrepreneur that was thoroughly obsessed with what I was building, and would wake up in the morning and think about it for 16 hours, then wake up the next day and think about it for 16 hours. Especially when you're starting out, there are so many things to do. There are so many emails to send, branding, logo, website, investors, staff, supply chains, manufacturing, market. There's so many things to do that I just operated on to-do lists, and those were kind of very short-termist, and it was kind of using what they call Eisenhower's matrix, where I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of Eisenhower's matrix, but where you're just every single day waking up and quickly prioritizing what you do that day. So Eisenhower's matrix is basically this kind of 4-box matrix, and it says, if something is urgent and important, do it now. If something is not urgent and important, plan to do it later. If something is urgent but not important, delegate it. If something is not urgent and not important, then you just delete it and you remove it from the list. So that's kind of how I was operating in the early stages. However, when you start to get employees and you start to have a team, you do need more structure in order to sort of focus that workforce and that resource, but also to explain why you're doing what you're doing. And that's where goals, I found in my career, became incredibly important, because inspiration is at the heart of leadership. And if you don't have a strong why as to why your organization exists, and from that why you've not created a secondary layer, which is what I refer to as my medium goals, but a secondary layer of things that you have to get done in order to achieve that why, then your organization can feel a little bit like a headless chicken, like it's just doing a lot of stuff for no apparent reason. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. What was I going to say when you were explaining that? That's what I was going to say. I didn't recognise the term that you used for that goal setting in terms of urgent, not urgent, important, not important. But I realise I do that in terms of my everyday work. So at the beginning of each day as well, I just go through that little kind of list, even if it's in my head as well. But yeah, I think a great tip is to actually kind of map that out. If you are a new business owner, actually look at what's important, what's not important, what is urgent and what isn't urgent as well. So yeah, thank you for explaining that.
I would say, and I wish someone had told me this earlier, I wish earlier in my career I knew the importance of saving time. I've come to learn that lesson the hard way now, because I mean, even at this as we do this conversation now, I'm filming Dragon's Den 3 or 4 days a week, and that means that my entire life, all of my personal relationships, all of my companies, my investments, my podcast, everything is squeezed into one day. And in this phase of the year, when I'm recording the Dragon's Den, I get so unbelievably obsessive about every single minute. So if you put onto my list something amazing, they want you to present a BAFTA, or they want you to go and do this amazing thing, my answer has to be no. I feel in the moment that the kid in me, or that sees this great opportunity, this great potential meeting, this great phone call, this great opportunity to be a patron for this great charity that I've always followed. But the practical, mature entrepreneur in me knows that every minute I spend comes at the expense of another minute. And so I would urge entrepreneurs that are listening to this now to be all you have, the number one resource you have in your entire life, and I talk about this in my book, is your time. It's actually the only currency that exists in your life is your time. And in my book, I refer to it as like poker chips. Every day you get 24 poker chips. By the time you've woken up, you've got 16 left. How you place those 16 poker chips today, tomorrow, the next day, will be the single thing that defines your entire life. Like just the placement of those chips. Every single day, the wheel spins. It spins every month, it spins every year. And when it spins, you find out the return that you've got on the placement of those poker chips. So when I wake up, 16 chips, I go, okay, I'm gonna put one chip on my health and fitness, because that is fundamental to that's my fundamental. Like my health is my first foundation. Without that, I have nothing. So I'm always going to prioritize that. And then, so when I look at my to-do list now, I look at it like it's those poker chips. I know I've got 16 today. I know I've got 16 every day in the future. I know I've got 500,000 for my entire life if I'm fortunate enough to live to 18 years old. But I do have a finite amount. So someone asking me to pick my brains for a coffee, I'm never going to say yes. The threshold of getting me to spend a chip now has to be unbelievably high. And I think if people get more respectful about how they delegate and how they place those chips, I think that can be one of the single biggest trajectory changes of their entire life. Just this obsessiveness about. So when I say the word obsessiveness, people go, "Oh, well, that's not a fun way to live." But you can put 3 chips on walking the dog with your partner, because you value that, and that's a worthy thing to value. It's not about only this sort of toxic productivity. It's about intentionality. It's about being intentional with your time, because you appreciate that is all you have, and you only have 500,000 of those chips, and they are going to decide your health, your happiness, your sense of meaning, fulfillment, your mental health, everything. So I've got to realize as early as I can in my life that my time is absolutely everything. There's nothing more important. Yeah, and I have to be intentional with it.
I was going to ask you before you went on to explain how you manage your time kind of as a busy kind of entrepreneur, but you've just answered it beautifully and amazingly. And I think I'm going to start taking on board some of these like top tips as well. And I never thought of it a bit like poker chips, and also, using and choosing to spend that time in the way that is productive for you and your business. And I suppose as well, for you as an entrepreneur, your business goals and priorities, they've changed as the business grows. And it's the same for our community listening in as well. Their priorities are going to change over the next month, 6 months, year, 5 years. And exactly as you said, it's about setting that intention and deciding where to spend that time as well.
We can't see our time, so we don't believe it's a thing. I think everybody listening to this, including myself, we somewhere in the back of our minds believe we're going to live forever. And I think I reflect on that and think maybe that is a good evolutionary trait for humans, to believe that we are going to live forever. Because if we didn't believe that, maybe we would be a little bit more, I don't know, we'd be different. We'd be maybe a bit more selfish in certain situations and less concerned about, I don't know, raising our young, or about, planning for the future. But if we could see our time, and this is why I have a sand timer on my desk at home, and why I talk about the sand timer so much. If we could see our time, and it was pouring away on a sand timer in front of all of us in our homes and our desks, wherever we are, I deeply believe we'd behave drastically differently. I don't think we'd get consumed by a Twitter spat with a Twitter account that has a egg display picture that said something about our hair. I don't think we would go and stand in that networking event or party we didn't want to go to anyway for 7 hours as we look at our time draining away. I don't think we'd get consumed by all of the pettiness and petulance that we allow to consume our time if we could see it pouring away. And the truth is, you do have a sand timer. I can't tell you how full it is, how much is left, but I know it's there because I know you're going to die. And I think That's a morbid but quite liberating way to, I think, just get to the point where you really prioritize your time. I wish I had done that sooner.
And yeah, I was going to say we get quite, well, as you said, kind of like obsessed with what's going on now and what we're doing now as well. I know I don't often think about actually my life a bit like a sand timer, and actually at some point that's going to run out. So I think that's a really great insight to give everyone listening in, actually, thinking of it in that way, and it will, as you've said, kind of make you and force you to kind of reprioritize your life, not just your business.
It's a prioritization. That's what it is. It's a prioritization filter. A lot of people are like, why is he talking about death and sand or whatever, and poker? But it's good to have those prioritization filters. One prioritization filter is your values. So as I said earlier, I value my health. So when I look at how I'm going to place my chips, I use my values filter to say, okay, it's not going to make me any money, but I know that the first foundation in my life, the thing that everything else rests upon, like this table, is my health. So I value that. I'm going to apply chips to it. You might value your dog, your children, your romantic relationship, your family. So place chips against that, and that should be a good way to know where to place your chips, and to know where not to place your chips, I guess, is the awareness of your own mortality and your lack of sand.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for explaining that as well. I was just going to take a little bit of a pause here, just to read out to you, Stephen, because I don't think you can see all the comments that have been coming in. Just so you can see how this conversation is kind of helping our community as well. So Hasima has said, hi Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your insights, learning and experience. They've gained such value from your content on LinkedIn, as well as the Diary of a CEO podcast as well. What other comments do we have? Winnie has said, when that's such a great point, important to celebrate completion as well of tasks when we were talking about tasks and goal setting. So yeah, there's been lots of great comments that have been coming through, so I just wanted to read a couple out to you, Stephen, just so you could see what our community is saying as well, which is great. So yeah, thank you so much. And with that in mind as well, I was going to move on to a couple of questions that have come in on the chat box, and a couple that have been sent in before the webinar as well. Lucy's question is quite focused on goal setting. She's asked, how do you set Utopia goals and the time frame you're wanting to achieve them without being completely unrealistic?
So when you say Utopia goals, what do you mean by Utopia goals?
So I'll let her reply in the chat, but I assume she means from that kind of far-reaching goals that might be kind of not sure whether they're going to get achieved, I assume. But I will also let her reply in the chat as well, in case she can clarify that any further.
Yeah, I mean, with my Utopia goals, so I asked myself, what are my Utopia goals? With my Utopia goals, I have this is kind of a bit of a contradiction, but because they are so dependent on the medium and micro goals, they are so dependent on the fulfillment of other goals to achieve them. So when I talked about the micro, medium and macro size goals that we all have, in order to achieve my medium goal, all of my micro goals need to be done. So, okay, I want to create the biggest podcast in the world. One of my medium goals to do that is we need the best promotion strategy in the world for the episodes. Okay, so that breaks down into a bunch of things. It breaks down into paid channels, it breaks down into the little cinematic 60-second clips we post on launch. It breaks down into Discord, Telegram, our newsletter, all of these small things. All of those small things, they do have sort of timelines against them typically, which vary and fluctuate depending on resource and various other things. For my Utopia goal of creating the best podcast in the world to be accomplished, there are so many fundamental goals underneath that need to be achieved. So my Utopia goals don't really have strict deadlines to them. They are kind of the vision that we're trying to achieve. I think about I would say they don't have as I said earlier, they're also not completable. My Utopia goals are not completable. And I challenge everybody to look at your big vision goal, right? And I challenge you to investigate what it would look and sound like and read like if you framed it in a way that you could never complete it. You behave completely differently, and you start to create a sustainable organization. So like, I'm going to give you an example. Social Chain could have had the Utopia goal or the macro goal of becoming the #1 social media agency in the world. What happens when we are? Doesn't that mean that, yeah, it's kind of like what Simon Sinek talks about in Infinite and Finite Games. Like, doesn't that mean we're done now? Doesn't that mean it's over? And then what? What was the point in that? So when at one point I changed the top level goal of our company to be uncompletable, or everything below it becomes focused on a sustainable way to exist in the world. Big shift that happened to me, I think in 2017, before I resigned. And I started to create goals in our company that were centered around creating an infinite organization that was sustainable. So instead of thinking we want to be #1 on Glassdoor, for example, for employees, the goal might be maintain 90% satisfaction amongst our team. That is something you can never complete. It's an ongoing feat, one that feeds into our overall goal of being like a great social media agency, whatever that macro goal might be. So all of my Utopia goals, all of my big visions don't have deadlines, and I can't complete them anyway. I can't complete them. Even like the podcast, I can't complete the Diary of a CEO ever. I don't want to. I want it to evolve and to reach people and to get better, and not to be the best, but to be continually better.
So I was going to say, maybe with that, and just some like top tips and advice to Lucy, it's about not setting those timelines, and as you said, reevaluating, re-looking at those Utopia goals and rephrasing them as if you wouldn't be able to achieve them as well. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much. And Lucy, I was going to say, hope that helps as well. Sorry, Stephen, did you have anything else to say on that? You look like you're about to say something.
No, I was just thinking about it. I was thinking about. I always use the podcast as an example because people they're familiar with it, and it's a kind of a simple proposition. We have a podcast, right? Just thinking, you know, a good example is the podcast became #1. Imagine if I'd set the goal for the team, for our team of say 10, 15 people. Imagine the goal when we started a year and a half ago, was to create the #1 podcast in the UK or whatever. Imagine how we'd be feeling now. Lost, like we'd lost orientation. Like, what's the point? We would have celebrated that moment. Oh my God, amazing. But then what? And that's why I think goals need to be centered on becoming better, not being the best, because it's a strange place when you achieve a goal. It's disorientating, it's confusing, it's an anticlimax. So yeah.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was going to say, Lucy, hope that helps as well. So I think we've got time for a couple of more questions from the audience as well. So Trin has asked, she's asked, please can I ask if Stephen would recommend any good online tools that he uses to track and monitor his goals outside of a business plan?
Yeah, so I use Microsoft Todoist to do. It's called Microsoft To Do. That's where all my to-do lists live. I use Discord. All of my company is now on Discord. And we use Notion. Notion is an incredible tool. I know that Ben, who came on my podcast from Gymshark, his whole organization runs off Notion now. And that's a great place to track your goals, to stay in touch with your teams, to project manage and those kind of things. So Notion, some of my companies in San Francisco are moving over to Notion as well. So yeah, Microsoft To Do is where I do my to-do list every day. So there's like co-collaboration there. So my PA, my manager, so basically everyone that needs me to do things for them, they all have their own list on Microsoft To Do, and I just go through. I can write stuff on there, complete tasks, and then yeah, all of my companies now run from Discord, which is quite weird because Discord is not typically a team management. People don't think of it as a team management tool, but honestly, it's been phenomenal. And because it's programmable and it's decentralized, and I believe that it's going to be a big part of social media going forward. I think that if we look forward 10 years, I had to bet where communities will live. as in Zoella or me, where my audience will live, I would probably bet that it would be Discord. So I moved my team there because I want us to understand the platform from an audience perspective, but also it works really well as a sort of like a team management tool. So yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I've made note of the other one as well. Was the third one Notion?
Notion, Discord, and To Do. Microsoft
That's
To Do.
amazing, thank you. Yeah, I'm also making notes of that as well for me after this session to look into those as well. So yeah, that's great, thank you. So got time for one final question. There's going to be quite a few business owners who are listening into today's session who perhaps have an idea or they've maybe just started. Kind of looking back into your own experience, how can business owners put, if they've got one business idea, put that into action? What first steps should they take?
Interesting. So I have a lot of ideas, and this is a problem. This is a big problem, because going back to my point about time, I don't have a lot of time. I have 16 chips a day, and a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, they have a lot of ideas as well. I have this kind of metaphorical, kind of figurative thing in my life called the someday shelf. And how it works is when I have a new idea or I have a business idea, I put it on the someday shelf, right? So I don't act upon it immediately, and I sleep on it. And then if I wake up the next day and it's fallen off the someday shelf back into my hands, I'll put it back on the shelf. And then it usually takes me about, these days, I'd say 2 to 3 months of it being on the someday shelf and refusing to stay on the shelf. And what I mean by that is it will nag me before I build a team around it and start to execute on it. And I think this is really important, because building a business, building a company, starting a project, starting a podcast, all of these things, they require tremendous stamina, regardless of incentive or remuneration or payment, for potentially 10 years. So you've got to really want to do something to do it for 10 years. So that's why I have the Sunday shelf, because it's almost my filter as to whether it was just a moment of fleeting and sort of ephemeral inspiration, or it's something that I should and have to act upon. I need more evidence in order to commit my 10 years to anything these days. So first thing I'd say to business owners or anybody who's got an idea is keep it on the shelf for a while and let it nag you. And what you'll find, like if you buy a red Peugeot 206, you'll start to see red Peugeot 206s. If you have this idea on your Sunday shelf, dots will start to connect themselves. You'll start to notice different parts of conversations. Your inspiration might build, or the opposite might happen. Your inspiration might fall. And all the businesses that I'm involved in now and the projects I'm involved in now, whether it's my podcast or things in the Web3 space or whatever, are all things that I couldn't ignore because they nag me on the Sunday shelf. As it relates to like how I personally get going with any business or idea or project, is I always do a 10-page deck. That's just my thing. So if I've got a new idea for a business, a podcast, a project, whatever, my way of understanding it and interrogating it is I will make a 10-page deck. It's actually 9 pages because the first page is always just the logo or the name, the holdings name or whatever. And then I try and explain it to myself in 9 slides. And there's a number of reasons why I do this, but one of the reasons is because when you have it down on paper like that, you can see it from a different perspective. You can see it from a bird's eye view. When it's in your head, you can't easily see all the holes and the gaps in the idea. But when you lay it out, you can sometimes go, oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't realize that's not going to work because of this thing. So, but also, in order to make your idea successful, whether it's hiring a team, raising money, or whatever it might be, you're going to have to show so many people. If I go back to when I was 18 years old, I probably showed maybe, including talks on stage, maybe 10,000 people my idea for Wallpark. Trying to verbally communicate your idea is a tremendous hazard. It's an unbelievable risk, because you will never be able to, in a passing conversation or over email or on Zoom, communicate with full clarity and appreciation and value that concept. So I always do a 10-page deck for everything. And that deck will evolve over time, but it starts there. I never ask my friends, pretty much never, because your friends tend to lie to you. Definitely don't ask your mum. I seek really critical feedback. Like, that's one of the most important things in the world, and something I wish I knew earlier is we as entrepreneurs tend to, with our bias and our egos, we tend to seek out opinions that will confirm our genius and our hypothesis. So, and we tend to overly dispute and disincentivize critical opinions. I've very much gotten to the place where I do the very opposite, which is I want people that are going to like tear me apart and don't want me to win to look at it. And when you make that shift and you put your ego aside, you realize that a good criticism is worth its weight in gold. Yeah.
I was going to say these have been some great kind of final top tips. So thank you so much, and I love that we've ended today's session with the Sunday shelf as well. As you're explaining it, because I'm quite a visual person, I was literally visualizing kind of a Sunday shelf that I look at before I go to bed. So I'm definitely going to be implementing that as well going forward. And maybe quite a few people actually after this session as well will be thinking about their Sunday shelves in terms of business ideas. So we've actually come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much, Stephen, for giving your time today and kind of allowing me to pick your brains about everything to do with goal setting. I know we've gone through a lot to do with kind of macro goals, medium goals, those much larger size goals. We've talked about poker chips in terms of your time of the day. We talked about sand timers as well. So we've spoken about so many things. Yeah, so just thank you for kind of imparting knowledge to us as well for today's session.
I'm going to write down a number, right? So I've got a little game for anybody that's still on this call. I can see there's 900 people, so just stay for a second, okay? Yeah. We're going to play, okay? I've sent a number to the organizers. I'm going to type the number now. If you tweet me, including the Enterprise Nation and the Vodafone Business with that number, it's going to be a number between, let's say, 0 and 500, right? If you tweet me with that number, no matter where you are in the world, I will fly you to my home in London and you can watch whatever podcast conversation with any upcoming guest in the world that you want, okay? So I'm going to type the number into the chat. I hope nobody can see this.
I think yes, I think so, yes.
I've just typed it.
A number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't tell anybody. I think someone's just sent it to all.
Oh no, maybe.
It's maybe a guess.
Yeah, I think someone sent it all. Should we change the number?
Okay, I'm going to change the number because that one was sent to everyone. So I'm going to change the number. So if you get this number right, then okay, I've sent it again. If you get this number right, I'll fly you from wherever you are in the world or whatever, and you can come to London and hang out with me in my home where we film the podcast as a thank you for hanging around all this time until the very end of this webinar. As a thank you, just tag me, tag Enterprise Nation and Vodafone Business, and I'm looking at my Twitter to see the number.
It's amazing. I was going to say, I'm sure everyone the other end of this is getting. Have you got someone?
Not yet. There's people guessing, so I can see all of your tweets coming in. Can you see that?
Okay. I was going to say everyone's probably now, literally right now, on their phones, being like, "Quick, go on." Kind of Twitter, Instagram, let's do that now. I can see the number in front of me, and I can even pull that from the chat as well in case people need it as evidence for the number. But yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. That's an amazing opportunity for everyone listening as well. And yeah, we've been here for just nearly 50 minutes now. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining. I just wanted to say before we finish as well, I want to say thank you to everyone who's attended. So we're going to be sending a follow-up email of resources, top tips, and the recording of today's session. So don't worry. Or have we got someone?
Not yet.
Okay.
Just so 33. That was the first number. We've got a new number.
Okay, we've got a new number. Yeah. Don't all be tweeting 33.
Lena, Anne, Amelia, Dash, Ian, Matt, Josh, Chris, Wendy, Tamsin, AO, Simon, Mike, Jamie Stewart, Jesse Wicks. Okay, if someone gets the number right, then I'll quote retweet them and then we'll swap them.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you want to wait until they do? Or yeah, let's do that. That sounds good.
Amazing, we'll do.
Oh, thank you. I know everyone's going to be so excited right now, kind of waiting with bated breath by their phones as well. So yeah, that's an amazing opportunity. As I said, thank you so much. someone is going to be getting a flight over to listen in person to one of Stephen's podcasts, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Steven. And yeah, as I was going to say, so yeah, if you miss any part of today's session, don't worry, we'll send a recording through as well as loads of resources to help you keep developing your business digitally. And as I mentioned, you can visit Business Connected to check out our other resources and our workshop topics as well. And as I said, we've gone through so much in today's session, and I know we've come to time as well. Steven, I can see a change in your face. Has someone tweeted?
Yeah,
okay, you're waiting.
We've got a winner.
We've got a winner.
We have. So we changed the number from 33 to 333, and someone has tweeted me 333. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. I can't quite see the name though, but yes.
Pete Casson. So Pete Casson, I'm going to follow you back, and I'll send you a DM and we'll sort out you coming to London to come watch the podcast. I'll send you all of the guests we have coming up and you can pick which one you want. Thank you, Pete. Thank you everybody for listening as well. It means a lot to me.
Pete Casson, congratulations as well. You'll be getting your very own tweet from Steven, which is amazing, as well as that amazing opportunity. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, as I said, we've gone through so much in today's session. So just a final thank you to our programme partners, Vodafone Business, for helping us organise today's session, as well as the Enterprise Nation team, as well as Steven Bartlett's team as well. So yeah, final thank you to Steven as well for being on today's session. And yeah, Steven, it's been so great to kind of interview you and ask you all my questions that I had as well. So yeah, just thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you so much. You've been great.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day as well. Bye.